Greg Pratt standing by. Greg has written a new book. If you love politics, and if you're just fascinated with how Chicago is in this position and the power in the mayor's office, when I've been in the mayor's office a handful of times, one of the times was to do the podcast that Rahm Emanuel used to do. And it is such a historic place. You can just sense the history in the room. The good, the bad, the deals, all of those things. And the stories that come out of it. And I think what Greg Pratt's done in this brand new book, Cities Up for Grabs, how Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot led and lost a city in crisis. It's fabulous. I've just seen a couple of chapters. It's going to be out on the 2nd. And he joins us now to talk about not just the book, but what's going on. You thought we'd just be doing a book plug. Look what happened in the news. Now you got to talk about that.
I can talk about anything.
Well, I'm glad you're up, and I'm glad you're on here, and I'm glad you're doing the job because people need to know from people still doing journalism. But let's talk about this state's attorney's race. Bridget Gaynor was just in here, and we were making the point that in the midst of having the symbolic clipboard, one of the things on the checklist has to be, get the votes from the drop box, and it doesn't take 4 days to figure out you didn't have them. So it's 2024. People get suspicious. What are you hearing? What's your take on this?
Well, it's really unfortunate and embarrassing to have those communications errors because you have to be on point, particularly when you have people stirring stuff up, like happens today, most notably with Trump nationally, but all over the place. I mean, people have concerns. People live in an instant information society, so that's a big fail on the Board of Elections right now that they haven't been communicating properly and. It doesn't seem at this point like it's going to affect the end result, but you never know, and you just don't want a bunch of mess.
Absolutely, Greg. You're one of the best reporters that I've ever worked with, and we've covered so many things. I don't ever remember a race being this close. Maybe Carol Mosley brought up Peter Fitzgerald,
a big race,
but a big race like
this
being this close, and now. Mired by I don't want to say a scandal or anything like that because I think it was just an oversight at this point, but just now all these extraneous factors and problems coming into the mix. Have you?
No, and they're all sort of freaked out because we haven't experienced a recount like some places have. We haven't had that kind of drama. Hopefully we don't have this kind of drama here. But we're in uncharted territory. I mean, I remember last year people were concerned that the mayor's election wouldn't, both rounds wouldn't be ready on the night of, and they actually were pretty clear on both nights. Lori conceded after like 45 minutes, but it was. I'm not a fan. I don't like my elections to be nail biters. I like us to have a result one way or the other, and this is some uncharted territory, and it has potential to get goofy.
And maybe this is the time to talk about this or not, but Steve and I were just talking with Bridget Gaynor before, too, and I said I've never seen a time where elected officials, politicians, and I'm not saying anyone specifically, because I think many politicians are guilty of this, not wanting to talk with the media or feeling...
I'll name names.
Or feeling like, hey, you know what? I don't need to talk to you. I'm not going to answer the questions.
Look at my website. You got guys like Durbin and Quigley and Gaynor who are always willing to talk. The governor doesn't come on. The mayor doesn't come on. The Cook County Board president doesn't come on. You're the public. You deserve more than that. I assume you're seeing the same thing, Greg.
Sure. I think you see that across the board with people who are kind of trying not to get questioned by people that they don't like or that they're skeptical of or whatever reason, or that looked at them wrong at a party once. You get all sorts of goofy reasons. And obviously me and Mayor Lightfoot had that experience for a long time where for a time she was very open to talking to me, and then she thought that I was mean to her, so she stopped talking to me.
Greg,
my life has never recovered.
I remember it was a parade, and you were walking along, and she's on the golf cart, and she's like, come on, Pratt, hop on. And that seemed to be a friendly relationship when you were covering her.
Right, where you could have a reporter's conversation in the middle of a parade.
I mean, but your job is to report the news, and you do it well and report the story. And I think she almost took offense or took exception to that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Where for a time, when I first started covering Chicago politics for real on the beat, I was covering Tony Preckwinkle, and I was pretty tough on Tony Preckwinkle because I'm tough on everybody I cover. If one of you two got elected something, I'd be tough on you too. That's just the job.
Well, that's the job,
Right.
yeah.
And Lori seemed to think that I was beating up on Tony because I like Lori and I don't like Tony, and that had nothing to do with it. So when she became mayor, and I have to ask her questions like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you following the FOIA law? She just she got really upset.
There's more to it, though, than the general notion that I had that if you disagree with Lori Lightfoot, it's a fist fight. It's more than a Napoleon syndrome. It's more than that. And you lay it out in the book. What was the turning point? What's the point where she, quote, lost the city?
No doubt it starts with the riots in 2020, and the city, they weren't really ready for them. They had warnings, they had good ideas, and she puffs herself up and gets very defiant in this meeting behind the scenes where she says, they're not going to burn my city down. And then that's exactly what ends up happening. And she never quite got out of that mindset. And then when 2021 was worse and worse over the course of the year in terms of violence, she just couldn't make a change and get rid of the police superintendent who was, nobody thinks former Superintendent David Brown did a good job. And she needed to make a change, and she couldn't make the change. And I think she couldn't make the change, and her former staff think she couldn't make the change because she couldn't acknowledge that she picked the wrong guy. But that was really the turning point, is when crime started to skyrocket, and instead of taking steps to address it and make changes, she kept pointing the finger at people and saying, well, it's not as bad as you think.
Right. And the adversarial relationship with the FOP certainly didn't help.
Well, you make a point in the book, which I think is fascinating. Let's do this. Let's take a break. We'll come back right on the other side of traffic and more about Greg Pratt's book, which is The City's Up for Grabs, how Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot led and lost a city in crisis. Where do we get it?
Anywhere books are sold, especially local bookstores, but also Amazon.
All right, stand by. More with Greg Pratt in a second. We continue on the Big 89 WLS Steve Cochran Show. Greg Pratt's here from your Chicago Tribune. And again, that book is The City's Up for Grabs, how Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot led and lost a city in crisis. I was going to make a point, too. Like I said, I haven't seen much of the book yet, Greg. It's out April 2nd, but I'm looking forward to reading it, devouring it. But one of the points that you make in the book about her relationship with the police is when the bridges went up, she and her team hated what that looked like, the visuals. It was bad for politics and looked like the city was completely out of control. It was the right thing to do. And she had either a commander, you tell me, but there was a commander or somebody that said, with all due respect, I'm in charge, man.
Yeah, that was at the time of the riots after, I think the bridges are up at this point, and they were in the conference room at the OEMC, the Operations and Emergency Management Agency, and people are running around. They have like 1 million screens that show cameras from all over the city, all over downtown that they can turn on. It's like out of a Batman movie. Mm-hmm. And the cops are doing their work, and she's there, and people are happy that she's there, and of course she should be there. But after a while, she starts just yelling, look at that guy, look at that guy, look at that guy. And sometimes on some frivolous stuff. And when, there's much more important stuff. So eventually, Commander Randy Darlin comes over and says, ma'am, with all due respect, I'm in control here. And she backed off, but it was not her finest moment.
No. Well, yeah, and it goes to what's going on with Mayor Johnson, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't appear that Johnson and his team learned anything about a relationship with the cops and the way it's been handled so far. He got off on a better foot by seeming like he was giving the police room to work. But do we know that it is different?
I actually think it is. I think that I think we're looking at, if you're pro-police, if you're worried about, this very left-wing mayor and what he's going to do with the police department, he hired somebody that everybody involved with law enforcement in Chicago respects, and Larry Snelling. Mm-hmm. and more or less lets him do what he wants to do. Obviously, he didn't give him ShotSpotter, which I'm sure Larry's not thrilled about. But, Brandon has been really hands-off with police, and I think that if you're concerned about that, that's a good thing.
Yeah, Greg, your new book, The City's Up for Grabs, How Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot Led and Lost a City in Crisis. It's interesting. I know you were telling us where you think the turning point was before, specifically with the riots, but initially she won every ward. She was the clear choice over Tony Preckwinkle, but I almost think she became a little isolationist in a lot of her policies, like this is the way I want it done, this is the way we're going to do it. Where she lost a lot of people, too, was with the I'm only going to have black journalists or journalists of color cover me for a day or two or something like that. That just kind of throws it in the face of the me's, the Mary Ann Aherns, the Carol Maureen's, the other people who cover city politics on a daily basis.
Well, if you remember, I'm Latino, and I had an interview scheduled.
Yes, I remember this.
They tried to drop that on us, and I said I'm not playing this game because one, she doesn't have the right to tell the news networks who they get to send.
Right.
She can say no to someone individually, but she can't say you can only send these people. And I thought she didn't want to talk to Mary Ann. She didn't want to talk to some people at Crane's, and she didn't want to talk to Fran Spielman, all of whom are white. So they ended up inventing this cockamamie reason for not doing the interviews, and I didn't want any part of it. But that was a really, when she won by such a big margin, she was of the mistaken belief that she won because everybody loves her and everybody wants to do whatever she wants. And she didn't understand, Tony had just come off of trying to ban soda. I'm joking, but
right.
She had just done the pop tax, right, which was highly unpopular. She was mired in the Ed Burke scandal. And, if you don't understand why you won, which is that the moment coalesced for you, it's not because everybody thinks you're the world's most brilliant person and the most wonderful person. So she thought, I won so big, I don't have to listen to anybody. I can do what I want. And that's just a mistake, because as quickly, your significant other might love you, but once you stop taking out the trash every day, the relationship's going to suffer.
Yeah, and taking out the trash is part of the job. Mm-hmm. I have a good friend who is close to Lightfoot and knew her well, and one of his major disappointments was she's very smart, and she could have made a significant difference in the job, and he tried to talk to her for a period of time, but she took everything very personally in this individual's view. I don't know that you can take things personally in politics. It certainly didn't help Governor Rauner. I mean, Governor Rauner was on the show years ago, and I said, what are you going to do when people start saying no to you? Because people say no to me all the time. I go, yeah, they work with you and for you. This is different. This is politics. As much as she was capable to do the job, I think that could have been the biggest stumbling block for her over the course of her 4 years.
Well, what she and Bruce Rauner both have in common is that they would tell you they weren't politicians before they ran for office, mm-hmm. and they would both come on and tell you, I'm not a politician, I'm not a politician. And it's like, well, once you run for office and you get elected to office, you are a politician. And it's not a virtue to say, I'm not going to work with people and I'm going to fight people. And so she absolutely had that problem where she never could adapt her personality from prosecutor, which works very well, especially in a campaign when you're drawing distinctions with the problems and the issues there. But when you're up against when you're negotiating with the FOP, you're not there in a court of law. You're trying to make a deal, and you can't do that. Same with CTU, same with a million other situations. And she just couldn't transition her mindset.
There is a world of stuff we don't have time to get to here in the book, but that's okay, because you're going to go out, you're going to buy 2 or 3 copies, you're going to download 3 or 4 more, and that way, even if you lose one, you got a backup plan. Again, it is Greg Pratt at the Chicago Tribune. And Andrea, what's that book called again? I didn't get a chance to mention it.
The City's Up for Grabs, How Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot Led and Lost a City in Crisis. What a wonderful title. I mean, it just really sums up her tenure, I would say.
Thank you, Greg Pratt. Appreciate it. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you
Greg. Greg's a great reporter.
Yeah, he is.
And I remember when he did that. He stepped up and said, no, if you're going to pick and choose who you want to interview you, I'm not going to be a part of it. So that's extremely admirable.
And that's exactly what needs to be said, at a time like that.